Originally, FERDA was identified with a deep near midline lesion in the brain, upper brainstem thalamus level. But since then, it's also been seen in some diffuse encephalopathies, hypoxia, post-hypoxia, post-anoxia. And so it doesn't have to be something on an MRI image where you look deep in the brain, you see, oh, there's that little sucker, little white dot down in the brainstem that's causing this. Sometimes there's no little white dot. Sometimes this was just hypoxia. So, and FERDA, TERDA, and OERDA are all delta problems, and they're all major medical problems that they don't correspond with, oh, there's nothing wrong. They correspond with significant disturbed function. So
what are the symptoms? Like, what are these people, kids, parent, what are they feeling?
Well, imagine having your frontal lobe hit with a gigantic set of delta waves that are 250, 300 microvolts in size. Let's say your perception, a little bit before this big burst happened up in the front, you perceive something, some little thing, 5 to 10 microvolt worth of perception that's being circulated through the brain, processed to figure out what it was and where it was and whether you have to respond to it or not. But that 300 to 500 microvolt wave hits, the little ship is lost. There is no cognitive tracking of that little factoid. So if you want Gilligan's Island consciousness, absolutely hijacked, that 3-hour tour turned into something that just can't work. These big bursts of delta end up being dramatically disturbed function, and they will cut a piece out of your conscious process just as badly as an absence type epilepsy will, where you have a 3 per second spike in wave, where everybody assumes, oh, that's a missing piece. Little Johnny's got like 5 seconds missing out of his consciousness stream.
Like he's spacing out.
Yeah, and at the end of the 5 seconds, little Johnny will start up on his conversation where he left off. Kind of like you just hit pause and then hit pause again, and it freed them up and they kept going. So there are times that people have these and they're not that aware of them. Others are aware that they're having little wink outs or kind of blur outs where things aren't really kind of clicking. And they'll go in thinking something's not right. And if they look at the EEG, they may end up seeing it.
Welcome to Neuro Noodles, Neurofeedback, and Neuropsychology podcast featuring tech legend Jay Gunkelman. He is the man who has read over 500,000 brain scans. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The Neuro Noodle podcast is supported by listeners and viewers just like you. A special thanks to our gold and silver supporters. Earn up to 16 CEU hours by attending Applied Neurosciences NeuroGuide Workshop December 10th and 11th in Madeira Beach, Florida. It's led by none other than Dr. Robert Thatcher himself. There are 2 ways you can attend: online or in person with the link appliedneuroscience.com/attend-ng-workshops. And if you sign up now, you can join Dr. Robert Thatcher at his house for a pre-course get-together December 9th. It's going to be a blast. What a better way to enjoy winter by being in Madeira Beach, Florida, and earning up to 16 CEU hours. Sign up now at appliedneuroscience.com/attend-ng-workshops. Mindmedia.com. Get the latest EEG and neurofeedback technology from mindmedia.com. Their semi-dry sensor cap is a wonder to see, and their EEG amplifiers have been trusted in the field for decades. Their neurofeedback and QEEG courses will get you up to speed in no time Visit mindmedia.com now. This show is brought to you by the letter.
So obviously D. Obviously, we've got a whole bunch of D's in the EEG. So
What's the first D that comes to mind, Mr.
well,
Gunkelman?
obviously, we've got a big broad band called delta. The D for delta ends up not being a single thing. It's a broad band that has a lot of things in it. The delta band has baseline sway artifact of various sorts in it, has electrodermal sway artifact in it from various sweat sources, basically. It has infra low frequency, slow particle potential, slow sway in it, which happens whenever you hook up or unhook a network. All the network dynamics end up being reflected into the delta band. When you have a delta deficit in a database determination, generally that's a lack of neocortical dynamics. Instead of switching between networks, which requires the baseline the EEG rides on to go electronegative to hook something up, or electropositive to turn something off, that what rising and falling of the baseline is not a rhythm. It's a level that it can go up or down, and there are some things at the very low frequencies that are rhythmic. You have about a 10-second wave that happens that's due to oxygenation. Yuri Kropotov did some very good work on that back in the 70s. So this is, it's not new stuff. Delta also has rhythm in it, and the delta rhythm is actually large. It, you know, Barry Sterman will basically fall back on the delta rhythm seen during sleep, which in a sleep lab they look for 75 microvolts of size in the delta band for it to be a rhythmic slow wave sleep. So substantial voltage. A 75 microvolt delta is not a small wave. And when you've got slow wave sleep, they're ongoing. So they add up. The Fourier adds up the power across time. You get the magnitude, the integral average of the amplitude. Amplitude's a momentary measurement from the top to the bottom of a wave. You average that across time. That's the magnitude. So the magnitude of delta during slow wave sleep is gigantic. You can also have slow waves that are there because of damage. D is for delta. Sometimes it's for damage. White matter damage, specifically. Robert Thatcher in 1997, published a nice paper basically focusing on the fMRI, the MRI and QEEG correlation in head trauma. And alpha and beta frequencies corresponded with gray matter changes, but the delta band ended up corresponding with white matter change. Now, Stereotti's paper from the 1990s, early 1990s, which is basically a paper talking about the generators of EEG rhythmicity, and it's an International Federation of Clinical Neurophysiology position paper on EEG generators. And in that, he basically talks in depth about the mechanism of generation of delta. And if you decrease the white matter innervation to a cortical area, the cortex creates a sheet dipole. A dipole is the plus minus end of a pyramidal cell, for instance. That's a dipole. But if you have an entire sheet of dipoles, all of the pyramidal cells in a cortical area, when they all act together en masse, that's a sheet dipole. And the lack of an input to the cortex in that area will result in delta emerging from that sheet dipole. So delta is in fact a rhythm that is there because of the lack of an input. It could be a slow cortical potential, which is largely more metabolic. Slow cortical potentials have the possibility of going electro positive or electronegative. I mean, it's not a wave. It can flip on or off, basically. And electronegative is on, electropositive is off. And those changes basically end up happening because of glia. So glia can use ATP, the burning of blood sugar and energy, the Krebs cycle, basically, to generate the electronegative shift. And the electropositive shift is calcium waves. And the calcium waves were discovered early on as they were looking for slow cortical potential using optogenetics. But optogenetics are a research tool. They're not done with humans. You have to be genetically altered so that your cells will glow phosphorescently if they're active. So anyway, the D band, the delta band, ends up being full of other things than just the delta rhythm. Again, slow cortical potentials at the very low frequency end, infra-slow, infra-low frequency. And that brings up the concept of nested rhythms. The infra-low frequency or infra-slow or slow cortical potential are the low frequency nest that modulates all of the oscillatory EEG. When the baseline of the EEG goes electronegative and the cortex is on, all the faster rhythmicity can oscillate. When it goes electropositive or off, then all of the modulating faster frequencies die away. So you can literally dial up or down the intensity of the oscillatory EEG by manipulating the low frequency, infra-slow, infra-low frequency EEG. So cross-frequency coupling, nesting is a concept that Delta has to have brought in because it's how the delta band ends up interacting with the rest of the frequency bands and ends up being the base nest. You know, when the infra-low frequency changes, it changes all of the faster frequencies. The phase of the EEG is reset with delta, slow cortical potentials. In 2005, Eroy John, unfortunately, has passed, published a paper showing that the slow cortical potentials could phase reset the EEG rhythmicity within a millisecond. So you've got an ongoing theta wave, and it can reset the beginning of that wave to zero and restart the wave within a millisecond, which is a convenient thing because in 2004, 1 year before the publication from Roy John, there was a nice presentation by Wolfgang Klemisch, out of Salzburg, Austria, in winter tour at the BFE meeting. And it was a very nice presentation, and he suggested that if you phase reset the alpha and the theta rhythm and let them start at the same time and summated the wave, get the waveform that looks just like the event-related potential. And it was a European meeting. Gerd Furcheller stood up very politely and said that it's an intriguing idea. The problem is there's no mechanism to phase reset. So, it's a good theory, but it can't work because there's no mechanism to do the phase reset. But obviously, Roy John demonstrated the mechanism basically a year later. But I have to say that the interaction between Furcheller and Klemisch was collegial. This was not like a United States meeting where somebody stands up and yells, "You're full of it," or that's not true. You know, uh, go back to your lab. Whatever. People yell at people. But in the U.S., the meetings are energetic, but not necessarily nearly as civil. And I truly appreciated the cordial, civil nature of the interaction. Obviously, a disagreement, an intense disagreement. One person says, look at this, and the other one says, it can't happen. But they're civil with one another. They've been colleagues together for decades, and they don't throw rocks, and they don't break things, and they're not a circular firing squad. The neuroscience in Europe moves forward in an organized, step-by-step, organic way, and we kind of go herky-jerky here in the U.S., unfortunately, without quite the same level of civility. So, although civility isn't a D, it definitely it ends up being a part of the discussion here because of the use of the infralow frequency to help look at phase reset. Yeah.
When the techs are doing the brain scan and they do X amount of minutes, eyes open, eyes closed, how does delta come into play with either? What are we looking for?
Well, delta is going to be in any EEG to some extent. And obviously, if you've got a brief 20 to 30-minute study, not an all-night study or a 24-hour, 48-hour study, but it's just a brief 20, 30-minute study, you shouldn't be seeing slow wave sleep. Unless the person is really got a sleep disorder that's horrid, slow wave sleep just is not seen in a brief study. In fact, if you get a vertex sharp wave, which is a brief moment of the EEG putting up a slow wave at the vertex, that's at the CZ location, it indicates that you're actually responding to a sound while you're asleep. That's a stage 2 biomarker. But it's not delta, it's just a single event. It's an event-related potential. And it's you've heard something like a knock, a K complex, a knock gives you the vertex sharp wave, hopefully followed by a spindle, which makes it the full K complex. The knock is the stimulus, the vertex wave is the response to the stimulus, and the sleep spindle is the brain attempting to remain stable and persist on the descent into sleep. So, the vertex waves are seen in sleep, and delta is seen in sleep. But if you're doing a routine 20 to 30-minute study and you see slow wave sleep, you've seen yourself a precipitous descent into sleep. There's probably a rather significant sleep disorder. In a sleep lab, they have an MSLT, multiple sleep latency test, and they'll give you 5 naps in the afternoon. Now, if you think of a sleep lab, they hook everything up: oxygen sensors for your nose and mouth, body position, muscle tension of your tongue on some electrode on the base of your chin, electrodes on your legs to measure muscle movement. They hook up everything, including sound, because they want to know if you're snoring. And a camera, quite often, if you're in an in-house sleep lab, because they want to be able to document what they see. Sometimes there's a person that has an automatism a repetitive behavior that they do in their sleep that's actually triggered by seizures or darkness. But they hook everything up. But an MSLT screening, they only hook up the EEG. That they're looking to see, do you fall asleep too fast? If you fall asleep too fast, it means you're not sleeping well at night. So they give you 5 naps. On the average, if you fall asleep faster than 300 seconds, which is a 5-minute mark, you've failed that segment. And you get a 20-minute shot at a nap. And if you fall asleep faster than 5 minutes, you failed that segment. If you average faster than 5 minutes, there's something going on at night. I mean, you shouldn't be falling asleep that fast. And then they have to invite you back and hook everything up, including sound. And at that point, they'll figure out precisely what is the nature of the disturbance of your sleep at night. There's some things that are just poor sleep hygiene, and sleep hygiene. What's that? A shower before you go to bed or something? So, no, sleep hygiene is, when was the last time of your last meal? Did you wind down your behavior an hour and a half or so before bedtime? Is the timing of your sleep cycling appropriate? Um, are you using melatonin to assist with your sleep cycle? And if so, are you using too much of it? Is the timing of your melatonin appropriate? Some people take it like just before they're going to bed, and it should be more like an hour and a half before bedtime. It tricks your body into thinking the sun has set, and you should be ready for sleep. So it kind of triggers the onset of the whole sleep cycle. But the delta seen during sleep shouldn't normally be seen as a significant feature. The slow wave sleep is seen in a deeper state, stage 3, 4. They used to differentiate stage 3 and 4 in a sleep lab. Stage 3 was between 20 and 50% of the time on a very long page. On paper back then, if that percentage was hit, that was stage 3. If it was above 50%, that's stage 4. What they found is that it doesn't make a hill of beans of difference between stage 3 and 4. It's all slow wave sleep. It's when your body is releasing growth hormone from your pituitary, assuming you have one, and your body's throwing out the trash, and it's being collected. What happens while you're sleeping at home? The garbage collectors are out there taking care of things. The sewage plant is busy taking care of all the waste from the day. I mean, all the things that happen out there are happening. Your body is recovering from the wear and tear of the day. And if you've had a good solid workout, the micro tears in your muscles, which are normal, healthy things that happen when you work out heavily on a muscle, and it builds muscle mass because it heals. Well, if you're not putting out growth hormone, you're not healing. That slow wave sleep, delta content during slow wave sleep isn't producing growth hormone enough. Or if you're missing your pituitary, like some of us, and you have to take your growth hormone exogenously through a needle, but you've got to have it. It is your restful recovery during your sleep. So it has to happen for sleep to end up being restful recovery. And athletes who don't have sufficient slow wave sleep, that you're going to build up small muscle tears to the point where you end up with a muscle tear, not just little micro tears, but you're going to pull a muscle, and you're going to be out for a while until it heals. And being able to assist elite athletes, because elite athletes are kind of a tightly wrapped, a little overwrapped sometimes, and a fine instrument, but not always really good at winding down. They're quite often better at winding up than down. And going to sleep at night may be one of the difficulties that they have. If you lay in bed and aren't falling asleep and you're ruminating or just laying there not able to fall asleep, the mechanism needs to be facilitated. You can train up sleep spindles so that every little stimulus, which is going to create a vertex wave, doesn't keep you awake, that the sleep spindle happens and it lets you drift further into stage 2 and fall asleep. So training SMR to assist with sleep spindle production, because they're the same thing, helps with the quality of sleep. But your elite athletes have a problem with insomnia. They have an excess of beta spindling, usually at CZ. And with about 24 training sessions of SMR, they've been shown to end up having good outcomes, better sleep reports when you have just a little piece of paper to report how you're sleeping. Pittsburg Sleep Inventory is a good one for that. An actigraph watch, which is it's like a Fitbit for a sleep lab. They've been used for decades, and also MSLT studies. So the Australian Institute for Sports actually looked at the outcomes, and they found that it helps so much that they instituted SMR training as a routine for any of their athletes that have any sleep issues. If you have a sleep onset issue, if you have difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, they'll hook you up with a neurofeedback device and give you 24 sessions of SMR training, and they find that to be sufficient. Now, if you can imagine being an Australian elite athlete, where are you going to compete? You know, you're going to be competing upside down and backwards on your circadian rhythm cycle somewhere. So if you're not sleeping well at home, your sleep elsewhere is, what's the technical term? Screwed. You know, if you can't sleep well in a routine environment, a new environment is going to be impossible. So if you're going for an event that's a week-long series of events leading up to a championship or something, you're going to be upside down in your circadian rhythm unless you actually have developed your elite athlete sleep cycling, which is going to be required for you to stay as an elite athlete. You won't be in that top 1%. You'll be in the top 2%. And the top 2% isn't the ones that are standing on the podium, you know, with the gold medals. So there's a very, very fine line between the best performers and the tier just under the best performers. You know, fractional bits of a second, 10 100ths of a second difference between being on a podium and not being a name that anybody remembers at all from the event. So elite athletes are elite, and they have to end up learning how to control their sleep spindles and their slow wave sleep, which is in the delta band, the big D for today.
Earn up to 16 CEU hours by attending Applied Neurosciences NeuroGuide Workshop December 10th and 11th in Madeira Beach, Florida. It's led by none other than Dr. Robert Thatcher himself. There are 2 ways you can attend, online or in person, with the link appliedneuroscience.com/attend-ng-workshops. And if you sign up now, you can join Dr. Robert Thatcher at his house for a pre-course get-together December 9th. It's going to be a blast. What a better way to enjoy winter by being in Madeira Beach, Florida, and earning up to 16 CEU hours. Sign up now at appliedneuroscience.com/attend-ng-workshops. Melatonin, my ears perked up because just between you and I here, I take it at night. But what I'm hearing is
very common.
You got to take it an hour and a half or so before bedtime.
Yeah, that's
And then how
preferred.
much is too much? It's because now they make
They're
gummy bears and they taste really great.
gummy bears. You know, uh, uh, little sugar-filled packets
Yep, yep,
that let
yep.
you help you sleep. Hmm. Well, first of all, people have a tendency to say, well, you know, 5 milligrams is just this one little itty bitty gummy, and it tastes good, and I didn't really get a dessert tonight, so I'm gonna have like three of these little gummies, pop, 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 and they're gone. They do at a higher level have what's called a hypnotic effect. They give you a little bit of a buzz. I mean, not much, but enough to kind of be like a hypnotic sleeping aid. It gets you a little groggy and helps you doze off some. The intention of it is to use a smaller dose earlier in the evening and to reset your body clock. So instead of eating four, you might drop down to one or two and take them instead of 20 minutes before bedtime when you happen to think, oh, Jesus, bedtime, boom, plan ahead a little bit and let that wind your body down, preparing you for sleep.
I think the right thing to do is, with my uneducated brain, is you just got to bite the bullet. And if you can't sleep, then you stay up that whole night, and then hopefully you'll go to sleep, the next day. But it's like, I can't waste a day. I have to go to sleep because I have to perform the next day. I can
Yeah,
only imagine what the athletes do. And then some people turn to booze, and that
yeah,
screws up your sleep
yeah.
cycle. So what goes on there?
Well, people who drink to help fall asleep, but it's more like passing out than falling asleep. And the quality of their sleep is actually not good at that point. They have more awakenings, and the depth of their sleep is not as good. It you know, alcohol consumption for sleep again can make you pass out, but it doesn't give you quality sleep. And quite often you wake up with ischemic headache. I mean, the pounding hangover headache of ischemia, not a good thing. Repetitive ischemic headaches end up potentiating vascular change with aging. So let's not make ourselves old before our time. I mean, we all get that way anyway. So um, inexorably. So um,
But what's going on? I mean, it's you're sleeping, but you're not really sleeping, because I've even seen it myself. If I go out and then I'm waking up middle of the night, I can't go back to sleep, and that only happens
the
after a
same
night out of town.
the same difficulty with falling asleep ends up with wakefulness. Let me do some really crappy art. You have REM stage, you have awake, you have stage one, which is drowsiness, and you have stage two, which is the first sleep stage, and then you have slow wave sleep. And they stack them up like this, and then they you start out awake. You don't start out dreaming with REM. You start out awake, and then you're going to drop to stage one for a while. But you might wake back up, but you might drop back down to stage one. You might drop down to stage two. If you don't have a good sleep spindle, it'll wake you back up. But you might go back down to stage two. Eventually, at the first half of the night is when you're supposed to get most of your slow wave sleep. The first half of the night, the last half of the night, most of your REM sleep. So you're down to slow wave sleep, but it'll wake you back up if you don't have a good sleep spindle. You'll pass right back through stage two and pop back awake. And if you don't end up popping up into REM sleep, all the way up into getting REM sleep, the second half of your night, you're not actually dreaming. Well, what the hell if you don't dream? Some people don't remember their dreams, big deal. Well, it is a big deal. Let's say you learned something today in school or at work or in a neurofeedback session. You learned something, anything, X, Y, Z, some factoid that you're going to have to remember tomorrow to have learned something today. Well, you need to create slow wave sleep grows new connections. So that's going to happen early in the night. But REM sleep, you play back memory through those new connections and long term potentiate your memory. So if you learned XYZ today, you might only remember X of the XYZ tomorrow if you're not getting slow wave sleep to grow the connections that you're going to remember them with, and REM sleep that's going to be required. Now, you can imagine putting a bunch of little tiny windows in these. This is called sleep architecture. It looked kind of like a New York skyline, but this is called sleep architecture or the hypnogram. And you have 90-minute cycles approximately. You have 6 or so of them in a normal night's sleep. The sleep lab will plot these out in the sleep lab's report, and you'll actually be able to see what stages you're in. And it might be that every time you drop into slow wave sleep, you quit breathing, in which case you could have like central apnea, or if you drop into stage 2 and obstruct, you could have obstructive apnea. So breathing, respiration is going to be another trace, and it'll be in the hypnogram. There will be another trace for heart rate and blood oxygen and body position. Are you on your back? Well, every time you lay on your back, you obstruct. Well, don't lay on your back. We used to tell people who had trouble with supine, is laying on your back. If supine was your problem, and only then, we'd tell them to sew a tennis ball between the shoulder blades on a t-shirt and wear that at night. If you roll onto your back, you got this lump. You don't want to lay there, so you roll onto your side or onto your stomach. So nowadays, they actually have a commercial product. Somebody, put together a T-shirt with a tennis ball equivalent in the middle of the back, and people will use that to keep themselves from laying on their back. So the quality of sleep at night can end up being disturbed. And if you're consuming alcohol that ends up disturbing your sleep cycles, you're not going to get the deep sleep and REM sleep that you're intending. Let's say you take a benzodiazepine sleeping medication, or any of the routine sleeping medications that are benzodiazepine-like, the hypnotics, Sonata. If you take a routine sleeping medication, it actually reduces REM. So if you have a benzodiazepine or a benzodiazepine-like sleeping medication that's a hypnotic, you actually reduce the quality of REM sleep. So it's disturbing to a certain extent how much memory you're going to end up inculcating as a long-term memory at night.
Dreaming, where does that, that's a D. Where does that come into play? And what the hell is dreaming? Unresolved issues, a fear and a wish. I've heard so many things. What is dreaming, and how does it help us recover?
If it's a REM state dream, first of all, how do they know that dreaming happens during REM? Remember Joe Kamiya? Unfortunately, he was passed. Joe started out in a sleep lab in Chicago, and they were looking for biobehavioral markers. What's a biobehavioral marker? Well, something that you can measure that predicts a behavior. And they found that rapid eye movement corresponded with the state that if you woke somebody up, they would report a dream. Now, you can wake somebody up during slow wave sleep. Some people actually report cognitive function during pretty much any state that you wake them up in. but the probability of a dream being reported is really high during REM. And it's really not during the rest of the sleep stages. You can wake somebody up in stage one. They might have been ruminating about something or thinking about something. That's not a dream. And uh, dreams have unconscious or preconscious material in them, as well as factoids and material that you've picked up during the day, and they're all kind of put into that gigantic cocktail shaker and shaken and stirred and dumped out into your dream. Um, you can have a wild mixture of Dungeons and Dragons mixed with spreadsheets that you looked at work today. And God knows how that makes sense, but you have to play back your memories in the newly formed connections that were seen during the slow wave sleep for you to end up having long-term potentiation of the memories. So whatever Dungeons and Dragons and spreadsheets did in your dream ends up having some of the information during the day plugged into your memory in a way, into your brain in a way that's long-term accessible. And without that, you don't really have that accessibility. Let's say you're having real difficulty sleeping and you choose to, and let's say you're like a bazillionaire and you're a rock star and you can hire these concierge doctors that will come in and hook you up for sleep. Well, Michael Jackson wasn't sleeping, he was unconscious at night. There's a difference. Unconscious at night, you don't have a recollection of the night. You feel like, well, yeah, that was sleep because I don't remember anything. But that wasn't sleep. That was propofol, unconscious sedation. A normal brain during sleep is busy metabolically. The delta band during slow wave sleep is not idle doing nothing. It's busy metabolically. A REM, busy, like a wake state, basically. So normal sleep has brain function going on. Sedated unconscious sleep, which I call Michael Jackson sleep, which you see what it did for him. Not exactly a preferred method of extending your life. Uh, Having a doctor step out for a smoke or a phone call when he should be watching your propofol level, you can die doing that. And
Chase, if he was
it
still
was a
alive,
mistake in the first place.
if Michael Jackson were still alive, like, would he be having memory problems eventually, or what?
In fact, if you're not laying down memories, new memories, all you've got is your old memories. And you know, psychiatrically, if you're not sleeping, you're you're getting a little more loopy all the time. You're not sleeping. If you've ever watched, um, you know, fraternities do scumming, uh, and quite often keep people awake for multiple days as a way to break them down to build them up, or some foolish. Uh, you're you're doing the same thing because you had to do it to get in, and you're going to make them suffer. It's not a wise thing. Scumming, people get hurt. Um, it's you know it, uh, hazing people to make them qualified to get into a group. I mean, there's still groups doing it,
You
but
mean,
it's
Jay, like a doctor in the residency?
oh
Isn't that the
yeah, like a
dumbest
doctor
thing?
in their residency. So I want you to stay up for 48 hours and see how good a doctor you are. You don't even know what up and down is at the end of the 48 hours, and you're making life and death decisions for patients. So yeah, um, lack of sleep progressively degrades your mental function. If you watch somebody who's a bipolar disorder, they're manic. If you can keep them sleeping, they have bipolar disorder without the psychosis. If you can't maintain sleep for them, they go crazy. And 2-3 days no sleep, there's Looney Tunes. Walter Lantz could be drawing them. So we we basically end up having sleep as a necessity for our persistent daytime functioning. If our brains aren't doing what they're supposed to do during sleep, throwing out the trash, building new connections, playing back memories so you have them long-term potentiated so you can learn something and know something. If that's not happening, um, your, your, your function is going to degrade, and it'll degrade persistently. So we have trouble seeing normal subjects going through the entire 10 minutes with the eyes closed nowadays. It used to be that the theta beta ratio was accurate, identifying ADD from normal 95 to 98% of the time. It's 50% accuracy at best at this point, and it's no longer an accurate determinator because the quality of sleep isn't there anymore. The average kid sleeps 2 hours a night less than they did in 1999, and the theta beta ratio has ceased to be predictive. Its effect size went from 1.8 to 0.2. And a 1.8 effect size, you can separate two curves, one from each other. So you can identify, oh, this is the normal curve, and this is the ADD curve. And they're separate, so it's easy to see which one you're in. But when you're at a 0.2, they overlap so far, you can't tell which curve you're in. That, the outliers and the normal sit right up there with the people in the ADD group. You're not able to differentiate them accurately at all. So again, 50%. Save me the trouble of all the goop in the hair and the expense of the amplifier. Get me a nickel, I'll flip it, and we'll get you the same odds. So save all the time and trouble. You get you the same prediction.
Delta, okay, is a culprit in sleep. Does it pop up in any other quote unquote symptoms that people have?
Well, there's frontal intermittent rhythmic delta activity. There's temporal intermittent rhythmic delta activity, TIRDA. I don't make these words up. There's occipital intermittent rhythmic delta activity, OIRDA. Again, I don't make these words up. So you can have problems in the brain that have big bursts intermittently of delta activity. If you're very, very young, most likely in the back of the head. Temporal, a little bit older. Frontal is usually seen in adults, but the temporal can be seen in adults as well, and in some kids. Now, D is also for desynchronization. Event-related synchronization, event-related desynchronization. And this is Gert Furtscheller's work. Gert Furtscheller ran the lab in Graz, Austria. And ERS ERD was, if you want to see something from Furtscheller, I've got a little something. So event-related synchronization, desynchronization basically looks at EEG. And this is an EEG trace from Gert Furtscheller at C3 as he's imagining cutting a bread with a bread knife. And this is how you spell Gert Furtscheller. And this is the EEG pattern put onto a knife blade on a bread knife made out of vanadium and tungsten. 650 euro, but sometimes you just can't pass these deals up, So
that's a hell of a knife.
not everybody
That's a
has
knife.
not everybody has a collectible Gert Furtscheller. This is serial number 1 off of production. The Gert Furtscheller students at GTech, Christoph Guger being the head of GTech, decided to, in his honor, create a series of these knives. 200-year-old olive tree handle and tungsten vanadium blade, and this sucker is sharp. It will cut over. It'll cut bread, but if you tried to test it with your finger, you'd be cutting your finger. I mean, it's amazingly sharp.
No, that's
So
worth it for that knife.
Gert Furtscheller does ERS ERD and event-related desynchronization, event-related synchronization. And actually, he's got a book that he wrote, a book that he was the editor of. Actually, Barry Sterman has a chapter in there about post-reinforcement synchronization, which is an event-related synchronization. After you're done with a task, your brain has a big burst of alpha. So you have a CPT task, go, no-go type task where you have to respond. After you hit the button for a response, if you think you did it right, you get a big burst of alpha. And that's the brain saying, that's the brain's reward or relief, basically. So ERS, ERD has an ERS in the book that was added in there because of work by Sterman. But event-related desynchronization is also there. Obviously, when you're cutting with a knife, when you're holding still, the alpha happens, but when you're moving, the desynchronization happens. And Gert Furtscheller uses wavelet analysis to show the event-related synchronization, desynchronization. And I think that's actually one of the better forms of analysis, actually, of the EEG. And so the letter D includes desynchronization. And Gert Furtscheller doesn't start with a D or anything like that, but you've seen the blade at least at this point for ERS.
Jay,
ERD.
you've got your own alphabet, my friend. This show has been brought to you by the letter D.
Yeah.
Jay Gunkelman, thank you again for another hour of wonder. The Neuro Noodle podcast is supported by listeners and viewers just like you. A special thanks to our gold and silver supporters. Earn up to 16 CEU hours by attending Applied Neurosciences NeuroGuide Workshop December 10th and 11th in Madeira Beach, Florida. It's led by none other than Dr. Robert Thatcher himself. There are 2 ways you can attend: online or in person with the link appliedneuroscience.com/attend-ng-workshops. And if you sign up now, you can join Dr. Robert Thatcher at his house for a pre-course get-together December 9th. It's going to be a blast. What a better way to enjoy winter by being in Madeira Beach, Florida, and earning up to 16 CEU hours. Sign up now at appliedneuroscience.com/attend-ng-workshops. Mindmedia.com. Get the latest EEG and neurofeedback technology from mindmedia.com. Their semi-dry sensor cap is a wonder to see, and their EEG amplifiers have been trusted in the field for decades. Their neurofeedback and QEEG courses will get you up to speed in no time. Visit mindmedia.com now.